Hey everybody, Jeremy Siskind here. You know me from my fantastic books. We got Playing Solo Jazz Piano, Introduction by Fred Hirsch. We've got Jazz Piano Fundamentals with Introduction by me. Hey, you can't always afford Fred Hirsch. Let's be real. Today I want to talk with you about something that's like pretty foundational for good jazz piano, which is using upper structures. And I want to talk about what they are, how to find them, and then a few ways that you would use them in your playing. And there's so many ways. I'm sure we won't get to all of them. But this is a key video here, so I hope you check it out. And with that, I'm going to feature my iPad here. This is a D minor 7, written all the way up to the 13th. I started with a D. And actually, I'm even going to write one more note. I'm going to write the root on top for reasons which you will see in a second. Now, because this is stacked in thirds, we can make a bunch of different triads within this chord. Or I should say we can find a bunch of different triads within this chord. So, going from least obvious to most obvious, get out of there, you. Obviously, we have a D minor triad, DFA. Above that, we have an F major triad, right? F, A, C. And above that, we have an A minor triad. Above that, we have, I don't want to miss one, a C major triad. Above that, we have an E minor triad. It wasn't my intent to have the minors on the right and the majors on the left, but that's just what's happening. And then above that, because I added that D on top, we have a G major triad. So all these triads above this D minor, we could call upper structures. Now, I think usually we use the term to refer to the ones, that involve more of the upper extensions. So probably not the D minor, not the F, but maybe those top four, the A minor, the C, the E minor, and the G. Okay, so these are all part of the chord, but we're going to highlight them or bring them out in certain ways. So for example, I'm going to get more into this later, but maybe I'm going to use the C triad. I'm going to highlight those notes as I improvise. Or maybe I'm going to use a voicing that uses C major or G major, one of these upper structures. Okay, but we're going to get more into that momentarily. For a dominant chord, like a G7, with no alterations, we're somewhat limited in the upper structures that we can find, mostly because we generally don't love using the 11th, right? That's the fourth note. It's dissonant against the third. So really, probably our best upper structure here is this one, which is D minor. By the way, Debussy loves this. He'll often voice a dominant chord by playing the root and then that minor 5 upper structure. Okay. We are very soon going to talk about other upper structures for dominant 7th chords, and there are a ton if we do use some alterations. But for now, if you want to go with a totally unaltered dominant 7th chord, then you'll just have that triad based on the minor 5th, or a minor triad based on the 5th would be the more precise way to say it. For the C major 7, we have an E minor chord, which is actually really lovely if you highlight it. And we have a G major chord. And then we run into that same problem that we don't really want to include the 11th. Sometimes on major chords, we do a raised 11th. That would be an F sharp. And then we would end up with a D triad, which is a pretty interesting upper structure. And it's not just actually that D triad. We would also, using the 7th of the chord as well, get a B minor triad, which is really nice too. Pretty groovy. Now let's return to this G7. In fact, because we can do so many things altering the chord, we can actually get a ton of different upper structures. So let's see. I'm going to make sure I don't forget any of them. We could do an upper structure based on the flat 5. So this would be the flat 5, the 7th, and the flat 9 of that G7. We could do one based on the flat 13 also known as the sharp 5. So that would have the flat 13th, the root, and then the sharp 9, excuse me. We could do one, and I'm just going to do the majors first, based on the sharp 9. So that would be the sharp 9, the 5, and the 7. We could do one based on the 13th or the 6th. That would have the flat 9 in there, so that's a really nice one. Let's see, am I missing a key one? Maybe not. But it is very nice to do a minor chord based on the flat 9. Because that has the flat 9, and harmonically it has the major third, right? C flat's the same as B natural. And then we have the flat 13th. So we got a lot of really colorful upper structures if we're using altered tones with this G7. And I think using the same strategy of writing a chord all the way to the top, we could find the upper structures for any kind of a chord. I just gave them to you for major, minor, and dominant 7th chords, obviously, but it's pretty interesting to find upper structures for diminished 7th chords, right? If we have C diminished, one way that we could look at this is with upper structures, right? If we use the whole half octatonic scale, which is what we usually use with diminished chords, we can find a ton of interesting upper structures. So B major, right? D major, F major, A flat major. And also the minor chords for each of those will also be in the octatonic scale, which is all very interesting to play around with. So any chord, if you take, if you build that scale up, or if you build the chord up, or if you use the scale associated with the chord, you can find the upper structures that will work. Now, I already kind of highlighted a couple things that you can do with upper structures. And I'll tell you what, let's take the C major upper structure over the D minor chord. So C upper structure, this is poor notation, over D minor chord. So the first thing that we could do with them is that we can use them to improvise. And these upper structures, these notes were already there, but what's going to make it interesting, and I'll make myself a little bigger here, is that we're going to highlight these shapes. So it's not just, if I play this like D Dorian scale against D minor, we're going to have those 3 notes in there. But there's a certain special thing that happens when we hear a triad that's going to color the chord in an interesting way. And it doesn't have to be that obvious. It almost makes it feel like polytonal, almost as though the right hand's playing in C major and the left hand's playing in D minor, because those notes have like a magnetism together. When you hear C, E, and G, you're like, oh, C major. And this is a really important approach in modal playing, to highlight some of these upper structures, because they each kind of give a different flavor to that mode. It doesn't just sound like D Dorian the whole time. It's just like, ooh, there's a little pop of C major. Ooh, there's a little pop of F major. Ooh, there's a little pop of G major. Or E minor, or A minor, right? It's going to sound very different. Right, so that was A minor and then G major. And I want to give you a couple of kind of further steps. The first one is that you can add in the second or fourth of the upper structure. And I think the theory here is that a triad has so much magnetism that you can get that, like, you'll hear those notes as almost like belonging to the triad. And where this gets really fun is that sometimes those notes don't belong to that key. I'm not sure that we're going to find anything in D minor where that's the case. I guess F major, if we add in the fourth, that's going to, that's going to go outside of the key now. So that gets kind of interesting, because we hear the F major as belonging to D, but then we inch slightly outside of the key with that B flat. And you'll hear people like Keith Jarrett and Brad Meldau and Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea doing this all the time, taking an upper structure that's inside the key and then adding a note, that usually the second or the fourth, that's in the key of the upper structure, but not the original key center. So that's pretty interesting, I think, but I'm biased. Or, here's another example. If we're in C, maybe you take E minor, E, G, B, but you add the second. Now it has a completely different connotation. Another thing that we sometimes do is, and Walt Weisakoff made this very famous in the early 2000s, is triad pairs. And usually this is that we find two upper structures, and I'm told that the most typical thing to do, this is such a saxophonist thing, so I feel like such a dolt as a pianist explaining this, but I'm told that the most kind of common basic way to do this is find there's always going to be two upper structures, major chords, a whole step apart, and then alternate between them. Basically use that as a set of notes. So like in D minor, we could use F major and G major, kind of as a set. So I'm going down the F major, up the G major, down the F major, up the G major. But you get creative. You could use G major and A major. Yeah, so that's nice. You could also, for a dominant chord, it's really nice. I think the most common to do, as far as I'm aware, like I said, I'm just a dumb pianist, is like flat 5 and sharp 5. And in case you're confused, I called the sharp 5 flat 13. Same difference, sharp 5, flat 13. So it forms this very bright sound against that dominant chord. So that's kind of interesting. And then I think there's all these things you can do. You can buy Walt Weisakoff's book. I haven't read it. I write jazz books. I don't really like reading them. You can add in little passing tones like. So you can add in passing tones or sometimes chromatic neighbor tones to make those triads sparkle even a little bit more. Second thing we can do, I already kind of revealed, is that you can use them in voicings. So, I like to keep 3rd and 7th usually at the bottom of my voicings, but, how cool would it be for a D minor voicing? I'm going to use a G major triad on top. And you can see I'm not playing it in root position. I'm playing it with the B's on either side. And I can even move between different upper structures, right? G major, A minor, G major, A minor. Or E minor would be a really nice upper structure to use. Why am I choosing G major, E minor, and saying those are particularly nice? The reason is that they don't repeat a lot of the essential tones. Right? If I have the 3rd and 7th there, and I play G major, it's all new notes. Same thing if I play E minor. Not nearly as interesting if I play F major, right? That's actually doubling like all of the notes. So I'm looking for upper structures that don't repeat the notes. Same thing if I'm playing a diminished chord. I might choose to highlight one of those upper structures on top. And then particularly for dominant 7th chords. I can use D flat major, E flat major, E major, all these to have different sounds to the voicings and create different melodies on top. So I think that can get really interesting. And, we could sidestep with just the upper structures, right? So I'm just moving it by a half step down and then a half step up. So that's all pretty nifty. And then some of you might have watched my video about interlocking fifths and sixths. One of the prettiest fills, and I use this all the time in my ballad playing. And these are using upper structures. So the way that this concept works is that you find a triad, usually an inversion, with the same note on bottom and top. So here's an E flat triad. I'm choosing to use a B flat on bottom and top. And now I'm going to choose the non-adjacent notes. So if I'm playing I Can't Get Started. Alright, so that's D minor chord, and I'm using a C major triad. That's a G dominant chord, and I'm using an E major triad. Here's an E dominant chord, I'm using a B flat triad. Here's an A minor chord, I'm using a G major triad. For D7, I'm using an E major triad. For G, I'm using a D flat major triad. So that's, again, hopefully, somewhat interesting. You can use them for fills, and even if it's not necessarily that, you could just do arpeggios. You don't really ever want to arpeggiate the chord of the root in jazz. It's going to be pretty lame and pretty bland. Right? You sound like a bad lounge pianist. But you can arpeggiate the upper structures. So there I'm choosing a C major chord, and then I'm arpeggiating a G major triad. Same thing on A minor, maybe I want to arpeggiate a E major triad. On D minor, maybe I want to do C major. On G7, maybe I want to do an E flat major. And notice that I am avoiding root positions. There's something about that root position, that fifth, between the root and the fifth, that is just, it's not going to be as sparkling. It's going to be maybe a little bit awkward compared to some other ways to do it. So you could use that for arpeggios as well. That would be really nice. And then I just want to put a thought in your head before I wrap up this video, that so far we've only talked about triads. And that's the most common way to talk about upper structures. But upper structures, they could be seventh chords, right? We could think about D minor and say, oh, there's a C major 7 in there. And arpeggiate that instead. And that's really nice and sparkling. Right, in G7, maybe we want to choose the an E flat dominant. So nice. So they could be seventh chords, they could be sixth chords. That brings in some interesting possibilities. For C major, what about a G major 6? I guess that's the same as E minor, but I'm getting to it a slightly different way. They could be sus chords. Why not? So, again, if I'm on this G7, I could use E flat sus. That's E flat, A flat, B flat. And that's really nice. Or I could use A flat sus. So it could be sus chords, could be augmented triads. You're not going to find a lot of those in major keys, but as you get to harmonic minor, if you're playing Softly as in the Morning Sunrise, I'm playing G augmented. Right, I could use A augmented. It's a little bit awkward. have to be just triads, or it doesn't have to be normal major or minor triads. It could be anything that you think of. All right, so that's my deep dive. Hopefully it was deep enough for you on what are they called? Upper structures. It's been a long day, guys. So check out my books, Jazz Piano Fundamentals. It puts the fun in fundamentals and playing solo jazz piano. I'll see y'all soon.